So this video is going to be on how I define rotations using a specific profile feature. And this is really about learning how to develop structural context in different areas of the market, whether we're in a rotational range like you see here, or we're in a price discovery type of situation like you see here, and what kind of tactics you can employ based on the price action and the information you have leading up to that. So, in other words, the story leading up to your session or your trading time will help you kind of define what you should be doing and why. So, I will actually start up in here in the choppy area and kind of describe how I understand and use this profile feature, and then we'll talk about what information I used that led up to the decisions made in this week here up to today. So ultimately, there's a lot of story here, a lot of context. But basically, before I get into all that, I want to kind of describe why I'm using high volume nodes and what market I'm using. We're going to use the bonds. Specifically, we're going to use the TN, the 10-year Ultra Note. And I use the high volume nodes in this because you can see whenever value is built in these markets, it tends to have very specific levels that jut out in terms of volume. And what I do is I use these levels as support and resistance, but really what they are is areas of acceptance or rejection. I don't really think of them as support and resistance because they don't always act that way. What I do is I look at how the price behaves in those areas, and if it rejects cleanly, that helps me define a rotation. If it stays in that area and keeps coming back to it, then it becomes more like a point of control of prior accepted value. So, in other words, we're either leaving an old rotation or staying in an old rotation. Now, not every market works the same way. For example, I have generally found whenever using a structural approach that one profile feature tends to work better this way in defining rotations over another. In other words, for the bonds, I think that the high volume areas tend to do a really good job of defining rotation. For a symbol like gold, I think that low volume ones actually do a better job of defining rotations and helping you understand where price discovery is kind of occurring. Um, it's just specific to the market. Some markets have a little blend of both, in which case you probably want to use the whole value area to define price acceptance and rejections. It really depends on your market and giving it a lot of time and a lot of practice. But let's dive into the high volume theory and kind of what's happening here. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to a 30-minute chart, and we're going to look at kind of how I read rotations up through the big breakdowns. Let me kind of put this back the way I had it. Okay, so just so you understand where these levels are coming from, the red level is the last level that I have in the price acceptance area. Once it drops below that red level, I have no more prior structural references that I can lean on to use that are recent enough. And what I was getting these from is the monthly profile. So you can see I kind of have high volume areas labeled here in the monthly profile. The specific one being this kind of area here in the middle that led up to this breakdown. And what they're really coming from essentially are these areas in the weekly that, like this area here, this area here, this area here, this area here, and kind of as they keep going, I keep adding to them. So as weeks develop, I keep adding to that picture. So you can see how this was a reference that I decided to use. It's a point of control. It's a high volume area. This is a reference. This is a reference. And then as that kind of keeps going out, I keep using them as they're being respected for rotations until we get all of this information up through here. Now, taking a quick look at that, here's how I would define rotations using price action in this whole week. So this is all the information I have leading up into that week. I have my levels, they're all built out. And what I do essentially is I look for where the rotations are starting. So where I could look for whether or not we're in price discovery or price expansion. This is pretty easy. You can just eyeball this and base it on the extreme ranges here. So why is this the edge and this the edge? Well, not just because price is moving that way, because you can see this high volume area was an area that held an old rotation. But then once it left that and started to discover price again, it came back up and rejected it again. So now we have up into this area here, this is the general range of the major big picture rotation. Now, as we start to develop our weekly picture, what do we see? See how price is behaving here? See how it doesn't cleanly reject that? That's because we're not at the edge of value. See how price comes up through this level, doesn't cleanly reject it? So we're not building a new rotation. So the assumption is that we're going to continue to our highs as we keep moving up through these levels. So what these become are areas where we can see pullbacks and then get on board to the upside. We see a clean rejection from our high of our rotation, built from prior information. And you see how this doesn't really hesitate at this area anymore. It just comes straight down through it. See how this doesn't hesitate here? Now you see how we're bouncing back and forth. So this is kind of like a micro rotation inside of the bigger. See how this is kind of behaving here? Once one of those gets left behind, you're in price discovery again. See how it comes down? Where was our low at down here? Now you see how we're kind of not really leaving it yet. Now we're out of it. So these ranges are pretty much holding well. None of this is really any new information. You see this information here? This is all price chop. So what this is telling you is this level is not going to be one that's going to see clean rejections until a new rotation is developed, until a new rotation is established. It's going to be somewhat of a point of control or a place where price and value has already been accepted from. So right now, what I would be defining my opportunities by is something kind of like this. I would say that this high here is the red area, and I would say this area down here is the green area. And then what I would be looking for in between that is kind of micro rotations in between. So I'll be looking for something like this as each day developed. Okay, so this area here is clearly a place of acceptance. Let's see how this area behaves. We don't even really do anything with it. You see how it's kind of like jumping around in here? What that's telling me is old acceptance is going to be tested. New acceptance based on the overnight session. We could possibly see a micro rotation on this day in between these two areas. Kind of see that little rejection, doesn't really work, comes all the way down to our lows. Let's see what happens. See how it now has left that behind? This is information. What this is now telling me is I'm now defining a new rotation. So we've gone from a rotation that was set in this area now probably to a rotation that looks more like this. Same similar range, but now this level here is going to act as probably more of a point of control and gather value. Let's see what happens. Yep, we get a little rejection from it. See how the price is kind of holding in there? It's developing it. It's building it out. It's re-accepting this older value reference after it was rejected earlier. So in other words, information came into this market that lowered our rotation a little bit. Comes back up. A real nice clean rejection. Where did it happen from? A prior place of acceptance. So now we have kind of a rotation that's built right in here. And that's how I would be looking at the rotations leading up to this week here. And that's pretty much how I would play it all the way through that week. See how this is now all accepted information? See how it's not going down to the bottoms? That's a story. It might be telling us that it might pop to the upside. Oh, there's that little pop that I was talking about. So as the price is moving here, right? Price is accepted this level, and now it's come up and rejected it, and it keeps rejecting our highs. But you see how it's never reaching down to our lows? So what this is doing here is kind of establishing this as a low again, and I would kind of look at this as the general way to go with the rotation. The rotation shortened up, and now it's sitting in this situation. See how now price is accepting this higher level? It's in discovery mode. It's going to look for a new high. And then it does. Finds that high here at a prior area that we've accepted and rejected from. And see how it defined that rotation again? Sorry. Let me get that back up here. See how it defined that rotation again? And now what happens? It comes down to lows, comes back up. And what's it do? It goes to test an older accepted value level. And of course, once we drop out below this bullish area, it's price discovery fundamentally. Fundamentally, the bond started to shift here. At this point, there's really nothing you can do to look for a rotation. What you're trying to do is go with that trend and go with that price discovery, because there are no more prior references that you can use to say price is accepting or rejecting from these areas. What you now know is that price is only rejecting and it's just dropping. So that's the whole story leading up into this week here. Price just continues to move lower each and every day, and that's kind of the main storyline up into that area. There's really no major areas that look like a low besides maybe this one here. This looks like it could be a low. But essentially what happens is this whole week gets built out. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to focus on the references that I used to look at this week and make trade decisions on price discovery and acceptance. So I use this high volume area, this high volume area, this high volume area. I'm just using the profile features. This level here, this yellow one down below, what this comes from is the monthly developing volume profile point of control. It was this level here at the time that week began, and it migrated up north as this value was built here. But essentially it was this whenever the week started. So I left it on this chart so you could see it, where I was kind of looking to make a decision from. So this was an area of high volume and somewhat of acceptance, even if it was volatile acceptance. So price comes down early on a Monday. What's it do? It rejects from this area, comes up and rejects from this area. So what I see right now is a rotation to make decisions from here to here. If we break out, see how it rejects it again? If we break out, this information here is telling me we're probably going to go look for lower prices. It's a pretty distinct move coming down. It doesn't look like these lows might hold it because of the aggression. And it kind of just, stalls there and then goes down below it. But you see how it's kind of like holding there? That's developing value. It's what it's doing. It's developing a level. So what I'm kind of thinking is, at this point, we do have a high of our rotation, but we don't have a low yet, but we have a point of control that's kind of developing. It comes down. What's it do? Finds that area. There's really no information here. There's no value. There's nothing that we can say like, oh, this is clearly why it's rejecting here. We just know that the market moves this low, and what's it do? It rejects from there with some news and information. So here's how I now see the rotation leading up to this information. Here's the general rotation. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at these levels in this middle area as an area to either see price slow down and head up to highs or not. See how price kind of slows down in here and then continues its next leg. Sorry. What I'm looking for is a pullback into this area and then possibly continuation to these highs. There's the pullback. That's what I would be expecting. I would want or kind of be thinking price might chop in here a little bit before moving higher. See how it's chopping back and forth? And then what do we get? We get initiative in the opening of the session, and it goes up to that high. Now you see how it's kind of rejecting here a little bit, but not cleanly? What that's telling me is this move isn't over yet. So even if you were fading this, if you were trying to get low or get short in this area, on an intraday level, what you would normally see, let's go back and look at this from an intraday perspective. Hang on. Whoops, wrong one. This is the whole week here leading up to that. So there's our low put in, right? There's our rotational high. You see how this doesn't behave with this level? Whenever these reject cleanly, this is kind of what you're going to see. You're going to see something like this, where a level holds pretty obviously and market moves away from it. You see how it goes straight through it and comes back through it? That's value. So once we accept above that, it's a good idea now to be looking to that to get to the next level. So this was our big rotation. And now it looks like we've accepted that high, and it's no longer going to be the high of our rotation anymore. We've accepted this low, and now that's kind of what we're looking at here in the big picture, right up to here. So now our rotation extends a little bit higher. This is the big picture rotation. What I could say is during the intraday, you probably could do something like this in terms of information in a rotation. As this accepted up, this accepted in, and now we're in this area. Distinct information here. We have a move down. What happens? We pull back into an area that was previously accepted to see if it'll be accepted again, and it rejects from it. To me, this is telling me that we are going to go test the lows. See how this area is all being accepted? So we have a rejection from a high. We're now accepting price in the middle, It goes down to test the lows, and now we have a defined rotation in terms of price and discovery. And that's how, like, I would have read this leading up into, and this is what I did on Friday. We had a rejection from the lows. So what I was expecting is a move that eventually traversed this level. This area in here was not a place to trade from. It was a place to look for price to move against and then come back to test to continue. So it could be a pullback area, or this could be the lows that you could work from. Comes up, rejects it cleanly. CL now comes up into accepting it. So this rejection isn't something you should believe. If it comes all the way back down here, maybe you have a new price discovery level, but this is all information that you get overnight. So price kind of comes back up, and then this is right into the open of the bonds, right here, 8 o'clock. So now you have this information. What's your decision? What's it going to look like? Well, you don't want to make a trade from here. You either want to see this market go up and look for this as a rejection, or you want to see this market come down, look for this as a rejection, but you don't want to be trading from here just yet. See how the market's whipping back and forth through it? Now that we've come down and we've kind of pushed away from it, we're looking for buying opportunities. And this just happens to be a news event that kind of reversed this. But once we start to see that distinct reversal in the price action, this is what I did intraday. Where is it? This is what I did intraday. Came in, got the news event that occurred right before 10 o'clock, started to push up a little bit, and we got this flaggy behavior. This flag makes sense in the context of what we're seeing in the price action to get long, because we now know that this level is being accepted and it's not the defined edge of a rotation. This was and this was. So we never really get a chance down below to get involved with the best possible trading area, but we get an imbalanced state that makes sense now with our accepted value. So what we want to see is price come down through here and possibly just hold this area for the next extension up to the highs. And that's essentially what we see, and that's kind of where it closes. So that's overall how I would build and read the way a market rotates and how I use high volume areas to either see acceptance or see them as edges of value. It really comes down to how price behaves around those areas. And you don't always have all the information, right? So like, for example, if you were looking at this little area here, just in general, right? What do you see? A rejection from this area, a rejection from this area. These are very tight, small rotations in a price discovery type of situation. Now, this is all prior week. You wouldn't have had these references there, right? You would have just seen these little rotations and said, okay, if it breaks out of this rotation, that rotation's over. It breaks down a full equal distance from that, and we establish a new rotation. So we're in a new rotation. If price breaks out of this, we're still in price discovery mode. If it comes back up, now we're starting to look at establishing some value. But it doesn't. It gets out of this and stays out of it. Still comes in through here. You say, okay, here's a new rotation. We have a high that's put in. It comes all the way down here. We actually finally get like a low in this area here. We say, all right, now we have a distinct change in the price pattern. It looks like we're going to start building value. How do I see those rotations and how do I see them being built? So we have a level that's kind of created here, but what's it doing? A lot of acceptance in this picture comes up. Now we start to see the cleaner rejections. This now is a level that I would say is resistance. This area is a level that was accepted, and we would have to watch out for lows beyond that. So I would kind of say this is your new value of rotation. And then you start to see this information. What that is telling you is that your information is good. You still have more to the downside to complete this rotation, and there's still a viable high here that might contain that rotation moving forward. And that's exactly what we end up seeing down in here. More price acceptance, looking for that high moving forward with the point of control in the middle. So hopefully this is somewhat illuminating and gives you an idea of how I read rotational context and how I see value being developed from a feature in the profile.